Up till now, we've been working with very simple queries. We've just been querying a single table. However, now that we have more than one table and all of these tables have built out these relationships, you're going to see that eventually you want to be able to get information from two tables at the same exact time. And this gets a little complicated, but the way we actually do that is by using something called a join. So we join two tables together. And as an example, let's say I want to get all of my posts. So I do a select star from posts. That's great and all. However, when we're sending back the posts to the user, right? Our front end has no idea what a owner ID of 23 is. He doesn't know what that is. And we ultimately want to display the username or the email of the user that created that post on our front end. So what we would have to do if we could only retrieve data from one table at a time is we'd have to then individually go and then fetch all of these users from the user table one by one so that we can actually get the email or the username. And that's a little inefficient, having to do multiple queries. If you ever get a chance to, it's better to just do a single query and get all of the pieces of information that you're interested in. So I'm going to show you guys how we can join information from two tables, because I would also like to get all of the user information based off of the owner ID field that's on the posts table. So how do we do that? Well, we start off a query just like this. And actually, before we go into this, what I would like to do is show you one of my favorite websites. So if you go to Postgres tutorial, just search for that in Google, you'll see that there's a website called PostgreSQLtutorial.com. This is one of my favorite sites. And I want you to go to joins right here. So this is how we get information from two different tables. And this page does an absolute marvelous job of explaining how to actually join two tables. And it goes over the different types of joins, because there isn't just one method. You've got left joins, you have inner joins, you got outer joins, you got right joins. And I strongly suggest you guys quickly just kind of read through this just to get an idea, because I don't want to cover every single join. I'm just going to show you the ones that we need to get the data that we're interested in. So let's go back to Postgres and let's create our first join. So here I'm do select. I'm just grabbing all of the fields and I'm going to grab it from the post table. And what we can do is I can say left join. And then we specify the other table we want to jam into my query. So now I want to get data from the users table. So I do users. And then we have to find a field in both tables that we need to match on or join the table on. And since we want to find the specific user associated with the person who created this post, we need to join on the owner ID. So what we say is on. So this is how we specify what it should join on. And we want to say, we grab the first table's name, right? The posts table. So we grab posts and then we say dot, and then we grab the specific column we want to join on. So owner underscore ID. And then we just say it equals to, and then we grab the second table, which is called users. And then we grab the specific column from the users table we want to join on, which is users.id. So now if I run this, take a look at that. It took all of the user data and it jammed it right into one single query with the posts. And so now I get the entire post, and I also get information about this specific user because we joined on owner ID and the user ID together. So I was able to kind of take that information from the other table and match it right up to here. Because we did a star, it's going to grab the columns it's going to grab every single column from both of the tables. And there may be times where maybe you don't want that. Maybe we just want a couple of columns. So let's say we want the title column, maybe we want content, and maybe we want email. Right? And this should allow us to grab the title, which comes from the post table, and the content, which comes from the post table, and then email, which comes from the user table. So let's see what happens when I run this. Right? You can see I got the title, content, and email. Now, if I remove this and go back to everything, just real quick, let's say I want to get the post ID and the email. Well, let's see what happens. I'm going to do ID and then email. Well, it looks like we have an error. It says column reference ID is ambiguous. So what exactly is happening here? Well, I'm going to remove this and show you exactly what happened. The problem is that the posts table has a column called ID, And the user table has a column called ID. So when I just say ID, it has no idea which column I want. So that's why it's saying it's ambiguous. So what we need to do is anytime there's a potential for confusion, we always have to specify the table name before it. So I can say posts.id, and then I could say email. Now I don't have to say, user.email because only the users table has an email column. However, if there was an email column in the post table as well, then we would have to append the table name first. So you only need to do this when there's confusion. However, if you want to just kind of stick to a certain convention, you can just set up every single property to have the table name beforehand so that you know which table it's coming from. Makes it a little bit easier to read. And so now I got just the ID and the email. Now let's say I want to get every field from one of the tables. I can say posts dot star. That's going to grab every field. So it's grabbing the post table, and then the star means, hey, grab every single column. And so I could do that. It's going to grab everything from the post table, and then I can grab maybe just the email in this case. And so this kind of ultimately does what we had wanted it to do, because I told you guys we want to be able to get the email or the username information for each and every single post. And if we want to, we can add in some of the other fields, maybe the user.id. So the user ID, however, that's just going to match up with the owner ID. But just to show you guys, there is some flexibility. And as I mentioned before, there are different types of joins. There's left join, there's right join, inner join, outer join. I don't want to spend too much on it, but I do want to cover just a few things. All right, so the direction references which table. So right now we're working with two tables. There's the first table that's referenced by from, and then the name of the table. And then there's the second table, which is referenced after the join, which is right here. And so the first table that's referenced is always referred to as the left table. And the table on the right, the second table that's mentioned is always going to be the right table. So you got the left table and the right table. And so when we do join, what it's actually doing is, well, I think this page actually gives us the best explanation. So a left join selects data from the left table. And I don't know if this is big enough for you guys, but I'll zoom in. So it's going to select data from the left table. It's going to compare the values between the two columns that we have selected. And for us, in this case, it's going to be post.ownerID on the left side and then users.id on the right side. And it's going to find where those values match. And if they are equal, the left join creates a new row that contains the columns of both tables and adds this row to the result set. And what's important is in case the value does not equal, the left join also creates a new row that contains the column from both tables and adds it to the result set. However, on the right side, the value is going to be set to null. So if we ever had a post that didn't have an owner ID, then what would happen is we would see the user information all set to null in that case, or the email would be set to null. However, since the way we set up our table is that every single post must have a owner ID, we're never going to run into that situation. Now, before we move any further, just to show you guys what a right join is, it's the exact same thing, but in the opposite direction. And so let's take a look. And things look a little bit different now, because what's happening is that we're going to go through the two tables and find if the owner ID and the ID of the user match. And we're going to join it on that. And we're going to do this for every single entry. And then at the end, you could see that user 24 has no information on the left side. And that's because user 24 didn't create any posts. So the right join will show you instances where something exists in the right table, but it doesn't exist on the left table. The left join will show you something that exists in the left table, but doesn't necessarily exist on the right table. But I'm going to change this back to left join. And now what I would like to do is, it would be great if we can get the number of posts by each user, right? How many posts has each user created? So is there a way to do that? Well, there is actually. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to grab the users.email, actually users.id, and maybe we want the users.email as well. Actually, we'll just get the ID. And here at the end, I'm going to say I want to group by users. post.id. So we're going to find all of these entries in our join and then group them based off of the user ID field from the user column. And so once we group them, we can then actually count up all of the columns. All of the entries on a per user basis. So if I say user ID, and then we say we can use a built-in Postgres function. And here, if I put in star, and I'll come back and explain what this means, we can hit run. And we can see that the user with an ID of 21 has 11 posts, and the user with an ID of 23 has 2 posts. The only issue is, if I actually do another query right here, and do select star from users, there's actually 3 users, right? And one of them hasn't made any posts, and so that's why we don't see it in that list. And if we want to be able to see it in that list, we need to actually change our query. And like I mentioned, the right join, if I actually remove the count column right here, and we just do a star, this is going to actually list every single user, even if the user has no posts. And so if I remove the group by ID real quick, right, you could see down here, I have user 24 with no posts. That's exactly what we want. And so now I can say group by users.id. And then here I'm going to say select users.id, and then we grab the count. So let's see if this works. And notice how all of the post fields are completely empty. So that's perfectly fine. And then we can run this. And you can see that it seems to have worked, right? User 21 has 11 posts, user 23 has 2 posts, and then we got user 24. But it says that there's a value of 1. And the reason for that is that when you do star right here, that means it's going to count null entries. So since we have that 1 null entry, it's going to count that as 1. So instead, what we're going to do is we can actually pass in the name of a column. And so once again, I'm actually going to copy this, paste it into here. We're going to remove the group by. And then just do a star. So we're going to get every entry, except because we did count star, it always ends up counting this as 1. So that user 24 is always going to have 1 entry, but that's not accurate because he doesn't actually have any. So instead of doing count star, we can actually pass in a column that we want to count. And so in this case, we can pick any of the posts column that we're trying to retrieve. And so I can just say post.id. And so when you pass in a column name, it does not count columns that have a null value. So if the user doesn't have any posts, he won't have anything under post.id. And then if I just remove this query and then run this, you can see that now I have successfully gotten the exact query that I want. And I can rename this column as user underscore post underscore count or something. That's a little bit more readable. And then, I can grab any other field that I want. Maybe I also want the users.email. And so that way we get just the information that we ultimately want. So you can see that doing these queries, they do get a little bit more complex, and you have to practice this a lot. And so I definitely recommend you actually just read through this document, set up a few example tables, and just practice doing your queries. But we're going to spend just a little bit more time on these queries so that we can figure out how to get the total number of votes. It is a little bit longer of a process, but I want to make sure that you guys understand exactly what we're doing. All right, guys, so let's move on to working with our posts table and our votes table. So I'm going to do a join on those two. So let's start off by doing select, and then we'll just do star for now. And we'll say select star from, and then in this case, posts. And keep in mind, guys, I mentioned that the first table you reference is the left table, and the second table that you reference is the right table. It doesn't actually matter which one is the left or right. The only thing that matters is that you set up the right direction of the join. So if we set up posts as the left table, and we want to do a left join, then if we ever rewrite our SQL query and set up our votes table to be the left table instead, then we would just have to flip the join to be a right join. So it doesn't matter which table comes first. Keep that in mind. So you don't have to start your query on just the posts. You could do this on votes as well, and you just change the direction of the join. But I like to do posts. And then we're going to try a left join once again. And we'll say that the other table is going to be votes, and we're going to join on, well, if we take a look at our votes table, which I'm actually just going to cut this out real quick. and save that in my Scratchpad. I'm going to just say select star from votes. We'll run that. Right, so there's going to be a user ID and a post ID. And then if I do a select star from posts, we have all of these fields. So I think you guys can guess the exact column that we would need to join on. So we need to join on post.id and then votes dot post underscore ID. So whenever those match, we need to get a result. So I'm going to go into my application and just run a few, I'm just going to vote on a few posts so that we actually have some data. So I'm logged in as a user and I'm going to vote on post 10. All right, we successfully added votes. I'm going to get a whole bunch of other posts. I'm going to vote on post 4 and 9. All right, and I'm going to log in as a different user now. Let's see who else I got. All right, I'll just log in as Sanjeev, I guess. My login. All right, we've logged in. And I'm going to vote on post 10 as well on this guy. And then we'll grab some random vote, 15. Okay, and so we should have a decent number of votes now. And I purposely made it so that one of the users didn't vote, just so that we can take a look at what complications that add. All right, so we have all of these votes. We've got the user ID and the post ID. So now let's set up a join. So I'm going to do select star from posts. And I'm going to start off with the left join. And we'll say we want to join with the votes table. And the field that we're going to join on is on the posts. We're going to grab the .id and wherever this is equal to votes.post underscore ID, we want to join the table. So let's run this. And let's see what results we get back. All right, and so you can see that, hey, look, a post with an ID of 10, it looks like it does have a vote. So this is one join right here. But then you'll notice that if I go down, you'll see another entry. So this doesn't mean in our database that we have 2 posts with an ID of 10. It's just saying that since we joined them, we have to go down the list, see where they match, and then print out a row. So it's going to print out a row for every single time the post ID matches the post underscore ID of the votes table. And so since we have 2 votes for the same exact post, that means we're going to get 2 different entries. Doesn't mean there's actually 2 posts in our table. It's just the way that the joins work. And I strongly recommend, like, if this is still a little confusing, keep reading that document and play around with it. If you want to see the opposite, actually, before we take a look, let's just take a look at a few other things. You can see we've got post with 4, and we can see that there's 1 vote for that because there's no other entries here for an ID of 4. And then we could see all of these posts that have no votes whatsoever. So that's what the left join gives us, because anytime we have a post, which is the left table, since we do a left join, it's going to list those posts, and it'll just put null on the right side. Whereas if we change this to a right join, it's going to do the exact opposite. With the right join, right, once again, it's going to look for any time the ID here matches the post ID, and it's going to spit out a row. And then the same thing goes for the post with an ID of 4. And then once again, you can see 10 shows up twice because 2 users voted on it, and then 15 and so on, but then you'll see nothing else. And the reason for that is we did a right join. So it's going to show us all of the votes and their corresponding post. However, it's also going to list out any votes, because it's a right join, that aren't associated with the post. Now, all of our votes have to be associated with the post because we put in that constraint, that check. So that's why we don't see anything with the null on the left side, because that's just the way our tables have been set up. So hopefully that didn't confuse you guys. We're going to change this back to a left join. And what we're going to do now is we're going to do, I want to be able to count the total number of votes for each and every post. So we're once again going to do the group by. So we're going to group by posts.id. So we'll group them together and then count them. And for columns, I'm just going to say, we'll say post.id. And then we want the count. So we'll start off with the star and let's see what happens. Okay, so we can see that, post with an ID of 10, we know it has 2 votes. But then everything else has a value of 1. This is not correct. We know that a whole bunch of posts don't have a value of 1. But like we covered in the previous lesson, anytime you have a value of null, then it's going to count that as 1. So I'm going to run the previous query, remove the group by, and I'll show you guys exactly what I mean. So now if I run this, oops, this should be a star. All right, look at all of these posts that have a value of null. It's going to count them all as 1 in this case. And we don't want that, right? And that's what happens when you do star in the count field. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to provide a specific column to count on so it doesn't count the null values. So what column should we use? We can really use any column. I think it makes sense just to do, we have to grab one of the columns that are null in this case. So we'll get votes.post_id. So now, look at that. We get the post ID, and then we get how many votes they have altogether, or how many likes. And instead of just grabbing the ID, I'm going to actually grab everything from the post table. We can run that. And this is the exact query that we're looking for. We get the post information, and we get the number of votes. And we can rename this, because I don't like calling it count. We can rename it as votes or likes. It doesn't really matter. And there you go, guys. And if you guys want to query for an individual post and get the total number of votes, it's actually very simple. It's the same exact query. We're just going to provide a where condition. And so here I can just say where post.id equals 1. Well, actually, I don't have a post ID of 1, so I'll grab a post ID of 10. And so now I get my 1 post, and we can see that he should have 2 votes. All right, and so that's how we do this with raw SQL. Hopefully this wasn't too complicated. Like I said, I strongly recommend you spend a little bit of time going over joins and practicing it with your own tables. Don't just use posts and votes. If you can probably come up with simpler tables to work on this and understand it a little bit better. But I think that's going to wrap up this video. And so go ahead and just save these queries for now so that we can reference them later.